Today on The Family Answer Man, we're answering your questions about managing difficult behaviors and forgiving family from a Biblical Worldview and the Family Answer Man program. This is David Orgis, and I am here with Dr. Mark Crosby, the Family Answer Man himself. Now, this time is designed to answer questions commonly asked in both counseling and church settings, and our goal is to answer general questions from a biblical worldview through the lens of our collective years of experience and education to help you, our listener, have a stronger, healthier, and happier family. Today, we want to thank the incredible people at Winter's Air and Days Smokehouse and Specialty Meats for underwriting today's show. Winter's Air is located in Denham Springs and services the Denham Springs and surrounding areas. Days Smokehouse is located at 35770 LA Highway 16, just north of Denham Springs. Now, this show is not a therapy session, and our advice to you is not to your specific situations. But mental health is a very serious issue. Family dynamics can be and often are very complicated and dynamic. So for in-depth answers to your questions, we encourage you to seek professional counsel specific to your unique circumstances. We do hope that this episode of The Family Answer Man will encourage you and inspire you to make changes that will lead to a stronger, healthier, and happier family. Well, I am joined here today by the Family Answer Man himself, Dr. Mark Crosby. And today, Dr. Mark, we are celebrating a little anniversary of sorts on this show. This is the 20th episode of The Family Answer Man so far.
Yeah, pretty exciting. We have really enjoyed doing this. We really enjoy getting the questions from our audience, and we hope that it's been helpful to our listeners. We have a primary Christian audience, of course, and so I'm hoping the Christian community, the pastors also who are hearing some of these questions being answered will be a blessing to them. Maybe they can use this in their own counseling practice or ministry as pastors. Maybe they can be of some service of using this maybe in their pulpit as part of their sermons, or maybe they just have a better understanding of how to deal with human behavior from this particular worldview and this particular concept of dealing with issues in family life. So we're hoping it's helpful to our audience and especially to the professionals who are listening as well.
We have gotten a lot of positive feedback from people that listen and in person and have emailed in, called, text, and we just want to say thank you to you as our listeners for that feedback. We really do appreciate and enjoy hearing from you. We absolutely love receiving your questions.
Yes.
So if you do have questions for the Family Answer Man, you can get those to us at familyanswerman@loumc.org. We love answering those questions for you. Y'all keep them coming in. We've got questions for weeks to come. And again, looking forward to being with our audience through this upcoming holiday season.
Yes.
And being together with you here today to answer our first question for the Family Answer Man, which it came in and it says, "My sister is bipolar, but refuses to take her medication. My mom struggles with her behavior. What can be done?"
Well, first of all, I think we need to understand what bipolar is. Unfortunately, for many, many years, the term bipolar was tossed around as anyone who seemed to be peculiar or, in some cases, a little odd or different. But bipolar disorder is a mood disorder, which means that your mood goes from intense heightened emotions, highs to lows, in a matter of days. In other words, a person can be very manic, hypomanic, or depressed for as long as 7 days or more. And so these manic episodes that could go for days and days and days cause people to say things, do things, believe things, get involved in some very intense emotional discussions, if you will, with others around them, neighbors, family members, friends, etc. And so it really does require, in most cases, psychotherapy, but also in most cases, it really does require some form of medication. Some of the more popular medications that are used for bipolar mood disorder is Lamictal, which again is very helpful. Seroquel, Abilify, we've heard that one. We've seen that one advertised on TV. Lithium is one of the older medications that have been used for bipolar. But it really does help to basically balance out the disorder that, again, is going back and forth, the great shift from manic to depression, these heightened emotions that occur and that can last for several days and then swing back and go the opposite direction. So what these medications are designed to do in most cases is to kind of keep balanced, if you will, the brain chemistry so that you don't see this shift, if you will, of these moods back and forth.
So with that being said, and having bipolar be based on not just quick emotional changes, but really intense, but drawn out over the course of a couple or several days,
right.
Can be really hyper, like you said, some hypermanic or also hyper depressed.
Right.
And you talked about medication in the Christian world. I know coming from the 80s and the 90s, there was a big stigma against don't take any kind of medication. You should rely on the Lord for faith. Kind of walk through a little bit.
Right.
You're a mental health professional,
right.
and you are a pastor.
Right. And so with that being said, mental health, again, has come a long ways, but it's still in its infancy compared to other areas of therapy and other areas of even medicine. And so, again, I think it's important to note that like people have certain medications for diabetes or for hypothyroidism, for example. Synthroid is a very popular medication for those who have hypothyroidism. And basically what that does is that makes sure that you have the right numbers and the right balances for your body that's needed if your body's not producing the right hormones. So with that being said, same is true for the brain. And that is, there are certain times when your brain chemistry may be off balance, certain times when your brain chemistry may not be functioning, if you will, as well. And so these medications kind of help to, if you will, balance that brain chemistry. Always talk to your physician, always talk to your psychiatrist, always talk to your healthcare provider when going through this and when discussing this. They're the ones, of course, that you want to speak to about any form of medication. Please know that up front. But these are just some of the medications that are generally used for this because there are some conditions, and bipolar is one of them, where it seems that some medications can be very helpful.
So talking through this and with so much misinformation and kind of a cultural stigma of what bipolar is or was, how can you accurately tell if somebody actually has bipolar?
Yeah, there are 10 primary signs that one can look for or see with someone with bipolar disorder. Number one, as we said before, they're mood swings. You go from being really, really high about life and hyper about doing things to a very low, depressed, I don't want to do anything, I feel worthless. So there's these highs to lows. There's this sense of, I want to buy this, I want to take care of that, I want to do this, I want to go here, I want to do all these amazing things. And you stay up, all hours of the day and night, to now you swing back to this, I don't want to get out of bed, I'm tired all the time, I don't want to do anything, I don't want to go anywhere. And so these mood swings really cause people around you to feel very much off balance as well. Again, there's this disorder that occurs. There's this disruption, again, that we see with people who have these vast mood swings. One of the concerns of people with bipolar is that when they're in a manic episode, and that is the risky behavior that they begin to get involved in. Sometimes they're very impulsive. Sometimes they drive way too quickly or too fast, They basically take a lot of risk in their day-to-day life and lifestyle when they are in this manic moment. They may be very aggressive. They may be very argumentative. They may be very difficult to reason with. You may say, hey, look, why don't we slow down and why don't we stop here or why don't we just take a break? But their mania is saying, no, I need to keep going. I need to go faster. I need to go stronger. I need to do more. I need to stay up later. And everybody around them is getting exhausted, but they're still going, 100 miles an hour, so to speak. And so this risky behavior can be a problem for the person with bipolar disorder because they're in this manic state.
In the new world that we live in, everything social media is out there. You can see that a lot in people's posts as well.
Oh yeah, they're the ones who are up at 3:00 in the morning, and everybody's asleep, and they're like, okay, now what do I do? And so instead of reading a book or getting some sleep or whatever, they're on their Facebook account, so to speak, and they're just telling everybody how wonderful they are, how terrible everybody else is, or who they should have voted for, or why the person didn't win the vote or the election, or how terrible your football team is, or just whatever.
And do that on days on end.
Days on end. And so they stay in this hyper state, and they just ramble, or they'll put themselves even, on Facebook, maybe through a video or something along those lines, and they'll say all kind of things that are irrational, irresponsible, sometimes irreverent, and they'll just say things and go off on these tangents, sometimes for hours on end. And so that is when they're in this manic state. And when they're in this manic state, that's when their behavior and their reactions and their responses can be even dangerous and risky. So again, one of the main concerns, though, that I've seen personally are those who, again, are reckless in their driving, reckless maybe even in some of their other habits. So just be careful, be watchful of that. One of the things you'll also see when they're in a manic state is when they do things that we would consider multitask, but multitask, 2.0, okay? Multitask on steroids. They are doing 5 or 6 or 7 things at one time. They're the ones who maybe get up and they start fixing breakfast. At the same time, they're trying to vacuum the carpet. At the same time, they're trying to bake a cake. At the same time, they're trying to, write, a recipe. At the same time, they're trying to call their best friend. And they're doing all these things at one time. Well, again, that's risky because if the stove is on and the blender is on and the oven's on and you're on the phone with someone and they're trying to do all these things at one time because they think they can in this manic state. Again, that becomes very difficult and in some cases very dangerous. And when you try to speak to that, they push back, they defend, they begin to do even more task, in this manic setting. Another thing is a sense of grandiosity. There's this exaggerated sense of self-importance. They have to do this now. They must, be in charge. They have to take care of things right away. If they don't do something, then the world's going to fall apart. And so they have this sense of grandiosity. This is why I have to do so many things. This is why I have to take care of this and go here and knock this out and build this and all at the same moment. Because they just believe that if they don't, then the world will stop spinning. So there's this grandiosity that begins to occur. Some even, get into the fact of they have this, I'm the savior complex. In other words, I have to come in and rescue the day. I have to make things better. And if I don't, nothing gets done. And so what happens is as they're doing this, they start talking fast and loud. Another symptom of a person with bipolar disorder is that they talk extremely quick. They're extremely loud. You can't get a word in edgewise. They don't take a breath. And it's like they literally wear out the people around them. Everybody around them is saying, will you please take a breath? Will you please quiet down? Will you please give us a moment to respond? Because they'll fire off from one question to the next, to the next, to the next. And the person that they're speaking to doesn't even have a moment to respond to the first question, much less the 10th question.
Yeah, it sounds exhausting.
It's very exhausting. And that's one reason why I think this person who wrote in, basically talked about the fact that, her mother is, struggling because without medication to balance things, without medication to, create some sense of calm in this person's life, it's a struggle. It's a struggle for the spouse. It's a struggle for the parent. It's a struggle for the caregiver when a person is in this manic mood. And so there's this grandiosity, talking fast. They cannot concentrate, and therefore they're often forgetful because they're focusing on so many things at one time. And so they may cook some eggs, leave them on the stove, and then go out and cut the grass, and then all of a sudden, the kitchen's on fire kind of thing. So they forget, they're not concentrating. Then one of the concerns is that if you say anything, once again, they become extremely irritated and agitated.
Well, and somebody that's in a heightened state like that, that's got to, again, be really dangerous.
So they're very confrontational. They're very aggressive. They get in your face. They're the ones that want to almost start the fight. They want you to know how important they are and how terrible you are. And so they have this extreme irritation and agitation. Again, in this manic moment, they cannot sleep. They may go, days without getting any real sleep. They may nap here or there. They may get a couple hours in here or there, but for the most part, they are wide awake, can't sleep, can't get any rest, and that in and of itself can be problematic. We need, I will argue, the research says, at least 6 to 8 hours of sleep. It's good for your body. It's good for your mind. It's good for your brain. It's good for, just your overall, mental health and functioning. And so when you go 2 or 3 days without any real sleep, it just exacerbates the problem.
Yeah, and lack of sleep can cause a lot of, like you said, other mental functioning issues, just being able to process things, being able to stay checked into reality.
Exactly. And this is why in some people who have a lack of sleep, they may begin to struggle with, am I seeing things? Am I hearing things?
The human brain's not designed to go that long without sleep and continue to function in reality.
There's a reason why God wants us to rest.
Right.
There's a reason why God wants us to take a day off and have a moment of respite. Another thing you'll see with the person with bipolar is that they have a change of appetite. In other words, in some cases, when they're depressed, their appetite increases. When they're manic, their appetite decreases.
Which may seem counterintuitive.
Exactly, because what happens is in the manic state, they are so busy doing other things, they really don't think about eating. Whereas in the depressed state, and I'm not doing anything, and there's food available, they're going to eat. Mm. So there is a change of appetite for the person with bipolar. So the question is, what can be done?
Right.
As we're preparing for the holidays, as this person is dealing with this sibling who has this diagnosis, so to speak, the question is, what can be done? And so there is no silver bullet answer per se, but there are a few things that people have done and can do that I believe is often helpful. Number one, if a person is not taking their medication and they're not getting treatment and they're not getting therapy or they refuse anything like that, then sometimes there has to be a family intervention. Now, again, that may sound a little cliche, but sometimes the family has to recognize and realize that if something is not done, this person could put themselves or others at risk. Mm. And this is especially true if something, like I said earlier, if they leave, the eggs cooking on the stove and it catches fire, something like that. Or if they're driving, right, excessively, as far as exceeding the speed limit, recklessly, etc. So sometimes the intervention has to be done among the family, especially if this person is a risk to themselves or others. Secondly, sometimes you have to allow the consequences to create enough pain in the person's life.
That's a tough one.
That is a tough one. It's that proverbial tough love that Dr. Dobson used to talk about years ago. And sometimes I've had to say to a client, let me know when it starts hurting enough for you to start making some changes. Let me know when it starts hurting enough so that you'll start maybe taking your medication. Let me know when you start hurting enough so that you'll hopefully go back, to your therapy. So what happens, though, in so many cases is that the family members, the mom maybe in this case, will bail out their child because they stole from a store during a manic episode, or they, got a ticket for doing, 100 miles an hour in a school zone or something like that. But we have to be careful that we don't always bail out these individuals, because as long as we do, they will never have the pain to motivate themselves to get the help they need.
So pain is a good motivator.
Sometimes it is. I mean, I will argue this is one reason why God, gave us nerves in our, hands. You touch a hot stove, you say, ouch,
to move the hand.
I'm not going to touch that hot stove again. There's a reason for that. And so sometimes pain can be, unfortunately, but necessary as a motivator. Thirdly, find a therapist that will work well with this person and also well with you. If you've got a friend, a family member, a spouse, a child who's going through bipolar or has bipolar disorder, you may need a therapist to help you understand what you're dealing with and who you're dealing with and why there's so much disruption in your home.
That is such a great point, and I think I'm so glad you brought that up, because a lot of times we can see it as, hey, I need to help this person get to therapy so that they can be okay, but we'll forget that we also can benefit greatly from being, in therapy, having wise counsel from a pastor, being also in our own, playing our own part in that situation, us making sure that we're healthy through that as well.
And here's what I tell people all the time. whether it be marriage counseling, or whether it be working with your child, family counseling, etc. It's important that you know who you're dealing with. And I use illustrations of dogs a lot. If you have a German Shepherd, you don't treat your German Shepherd like a Chihuahua. And you don't treat your Chihuahua like a German Shepherd. And you make sure that a German Shepherd has a lot of room to roam and so forth, whereas the Chihuahua needs maybe just your house or your living room. The point is that if you put a German Shepherd in a living room, or you give a Chihuahua 20 acres to roam on, you got it backwards. Know who you're dealing with is the point. Know what they need, and sometimes only through a therapist, consultation and coaching and counsel can a person really understand who I'm dealing with, what this is all about, and the impact it's making on my life. So they will help you to cope in these situations. Also, too, when you're dealing with someone with bipolar disorder, you may need to create boundaries. Now, we use that word a lot because it's a very important word. It's a very helpful word. Creating boundaries is important because the thing is, if you do not do that, then sometimes these individuals in their manic state will begin to take advantage of who you are. And they may take advantage of your good nature. And so if you don't take care of yourself, in other words, by keeping these boundaries, these individuals with bipolar in a manic state can and will take advantage of the situation and or put you at risk. If you get into a car with someone who's in a manic state and all of a sudden they're driving recklessly down the interstate, that's putting you at risk. So again, know the boundaries, know the signs, create boundaries, and beware of them putting themselves and others in danger. And in some cases, and last of all, and this is the one that's always tough to say, sometimes you may have to have them hospitalized.
Unpack that a little bit for us.
Yeah, so sometimes if they are saying things or doing things that, again, putting themselves or others at risk, especially if they are saying things about suicide or saying things about taking their life, or even in some cases taking the life of someone else because they're in this manic state. When you start hearing those things, and especially if they start saying how they're going to do it, I'm going to go down the street and I'm going to do this, or I'm going to go into my room and do that.
Right, if there's a specific plan.
If there's a specific plan, you need to bring them to the emergency room as soon as possible, and in some cases have them hospitalized. Maybe in some cases in a treatment plan in a facility where, again, they specialize and treat this disorder. So it's hard to do. It's not pleasant, especially around the holidays, of course. But sometimes it's necessary for your sake, for their sake, and maybe for the sake of those around you.
Right, and I think there's a stigma that comes with that, and people go, "Oh, wow, I'm hospitalized for mental issues." But you wouldn't be ashamed if you snapped your leg and had a bone sticking out the skin. You're not going to go, "Oh, well, I don't want to go to the hospital because I don't want to look weak." You're going to go get the treatment that you need.
And then hopefully, coming back full circle, that person will realize the importance and the utility of taking their medication.
That's right.
Just like a person on diabetes, or with diabetes, will take insulin shots or whatever. You do these things to manage what's going on, and in some cases, what's wrong, if you will, with your body. But you do these things to manage these things so that you can live a full and normal and productive life.
There you go, from the Family Answer Man. We do have a couple of minutes left for a second question today. So we're going to go ahead and go with our question that was written in. It says, "I can't seem to forgive and forget how some of my cousins and aunts and uncles have treated me over the years. I'm a Christian and I feel guilt for not being able to forgive my family. How do I do that?"
Wow. Again, forgiveness, as we've said before, is so important, not only for the people we are forgiving, but I will argue for the person who's doing the forgiving. Forgiveness, especially in a relationship, I've used the analogy, it's like oil, if you will, in the engine. It's important, it's necessary, especially if you want your relationship to thrive and to continue. So I think what happens in a lot of our situations is that sometimes we're not really certain as to just what forgiveness is and what it's not.
I think that's a great point.
And so here are some things that we need to be mindful of what forgiveness is not. We'll try to go through these fairly quickly. Forgiveness is not approving or diminishing sin. Forgiveness is not, saying, well, hey, they did this, they did that. So if I forgive them, does that mean I'm approving of their sin? No, it doesn't mean that at all. Nor is it diminishing what was said or done.
Right. It's fine is not forgiveness. Forgiveness is not saying, oh, it's fine.
Oh,
it's
exactly.
not a big deal.
Exactly. It's not approving of sin. It's not diminishing. It's not saying, well, boys will be boys. That's not forgiveness. Forgiveness is not enabling bad behavior. You can forgive someone, but yet and still make sure that you do not enable their bad behavior. But some see it as, if I forgive them, am I enabling their bad behavior? That's not what that means. It's not denying wrongdoing or pretending it wasn't bad. So many people feel like that if I forgive someone, am I just like pretending that, this was wrong, this wasn't wrong, or am I just pretending that it wasn't bad? No, that's not what it means to forgive. It's not waiting for an apology. Sometimes you have to forgive someone whether they apologize or not. Forgiveness is not forgetting. And I hear that a lot, forgive and forget. But forgiveness is not forgetting. What it does do, it's, again, recognizing, just like God does, God chooses to see us differently because what Jesus has done for us. So he can forgive us, but he doesn't, always forget, because he's God. He's God. He knows everything, and so the Bible says he remembers our sins no more. And I will argue, yeah, that's true in the sense that he chooses to see us differently because what Jesus has done for us. Forgiveness is not basically ceasing to deal with the pain it caused. When we get hurt by someone, the hurt's still there. Even though we can forgive them, we still may feel pain. We still may feel betrayal or rejection. Forgiveness is not always a one-time event. Sometimes it's a process. Sometimes it's ongoing. Sometimes it's taken a while to get there. And I will argue this, that sometimes, depending on the level of pain, often depends upon how quickly the process of forgiveness. So if a person, forgets to bring back your book, okay, and you really needed that book, and they forget to bring it back, and they go, oh, I'm sorry, I've kept your book way too long. Okay, I could forgive that,
right,
and move on. But if they, run into your car, it may take a little while to forgive that. You want to make sure that the insurance is there and the repairs are done. And then over time, you can begin to process it and bring that forgiveness. Forgiveness is not neglecting justice. Sometimes, people have to face the legality of what they've done, even though you can still forgive them. They have to face the consequences. Sometimes if they stole from you, they may need to pay it back. So again, it's not neglecting justice. Forgiveness is not, always trusting again immediately. Sometimes trust is built slowly and lost quickly. Yeah. So forgiveness is not, trusting immediately, but it's building that trust back over time. And forgiveness is not always reconciliation. Reconciliation requires two people, whereas forgiveness only requires one. So how do I know if I have forgiven someone? That's the question that I think this person is saying and perhaps asking for. Because what forgiveness is, it's saying that you don't owe me. Forgiveness is saying you don't owe me. Number two, forgiveness is not bringing it up again and again and again. In other words, you just don't bring it up anymore. That's how you know you're forgiven. Forgiveness is saying, you know what, I am able and willing, and I do and will pray for you. Fourthly, it's being at peace with yourself and being at peace with them. We're not at war anymore, and I'm not wishing for us to be at war. And last of all, forgiveness is seeking maybe even to bless them. So those cousins, that aunt and uncle, you may want to do something nice for them. You may want to do something good for them, even though they may not quote unquote deserve it. But that's basically how grace and forgiveness works. You do things for those who maybe don't deserve it.
Well, that's, Jesus sums that up with pray for your enemies.
Exactly.
That's true forgiveness when you can have that attitude in your heart.
And if we do that over the holidays, but any day, but especially over the holidays, I think it will create a better connection with our family, with our friends, and will help our holiday season, Thanksgiving and Christmas, be a greater, brighter, and happier time.
Well, we thank you for joining us today on the Family Answer Man. Again, we thank Days Smokehouse and Specialty Meats and Winter's Air both for underwriting today's show. And we hope that today, this episode of the Family Answer Man has encouraged you and will inspire you to make the changes that will lead to a stronger, healthier, and happier family.